Okay. Hey everyone, I'm Kira here with Daniel, and we are going to go over some of the updates and exciting stuff going on in the Scicloj community. And if you haven't heard of what that is before, then just stick around and we'll explain it as we go.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I think this time it has been this period of change. I believe for us as the Scicloj group and the Clojure community. So we found it kind of important to say what things are about and where they might be going. And yeah, maybe in a moment I will share the screen and we'll go through some updates and thoughts we have. And yeah, yeah, do we wish to add anything before I share the screen, or should we just begin?
Yeah, that's great. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff going on right now, so it makes sense to just walk through it all and then we can kind of demo as we go.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so here we are. That's the Scicloj
Great.
website. And in the Scicloj website, maybe some of you have been seeing our blog posts that uh, are a bit more frequent nowadays. And there is this recent blog post from the middle of April where we were kind of thinking about where we're going and what might be kind of special about this period of time for Clojure and for us Scicloj as a group. And maybe we'll not go through all of it at the moment, but we're kind of trying to tell the state of things in terms of community building. And maybe one thing we wish to focus on is the current relevant progress, mostly from this perspective of Clojure growth and Clojure's ability to become more relevant and accessible and well known in new fields, new use cases, and so on. And
Yeah, I think that's like one of the main themes or whatever that came up at the Conj last year and at the Reclosure conference that's coming up soon in May. There's this really big desire in the community to sort of expand beyond application development and reach um, sort of new audiences and new types of users. And so one of those groups of users or types of users that we're really trying to reach is people who work with data and people who yeah, do things like data science and data engineering. And I think there's a lot of progress in that area and a lot of exciting use cases for Clojure in that area. So that's what
yeah,
this is all about.
oh yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I think that's in a way a recent realization for us that making things accessible and well known and easy and simple for a broader crowd is in a way the core of what we need to do for data analysis and for Clojure. And some of us have this sentiment of actually preferring to work with data in Clojure. And maybe Kira, I think you have a lot to say about it, about the experience, this kind of special experience of working with data in Clojure, which is in a way why we're here, right?
Yeah, I think there's just it's a really well suited language for working with it, but it's not as common. So in that world of sort of data intensive web apps or data processing or data science, there's definitely lots of companies doing it, but I think it's an area that we could certainly reach a lot of new people, and that's what a lot of this stuff is about. Um, so yeah, I guess there's like a couple kind of paths that takes. One of them is reaching new users, and so that's why there's been a lot of development happening in this area of beginner friendly tooling and kind of on the onboarding experience and getting people up to speed. Because yeah, if you just dump someone into Emacs and Cider who's never seen that before, never seen Clojure before, doesn't know what a REPL is, they basically panic and rage quit. And so a lot of effort has gone into making the getting started experience really smooth and simple. And I think, yeah, maybe that's a reasonable place to start, and then we can go from there before I talk too much more.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So I think, we can go through this list. And one thing that really has been maturing during the second half of 2024 and further is the Nudge Toolkit for data science. And probably this is well known to many of you, but it is worth mentioning and something that has been experimental for a long time, but now is mostly stable, well tested, and well integrated, and gradually getting documented. And in a way, it is a way to integrate this list of libraries, which are, the core toolkit, so to speak, for our proposed way of doing data analysis in Clojure. And we may mention a few of them afterwards. And so that thing has been maturing. And we cannot, we have to mention Carsten, our friend Carsten, who has been so active and thoughtful in making things well integrated and well tested and automated around all that. And yeah, maybe I think, Kira, you have been involved in the design and thinking about the way this toolkit should be, and have been talking about it in your talks. Maybe you wish to add something here.
Yeah, for a long time. This is my like main hobby horse for many years. But yeah, I think this is a really exciting area of development. Just getting a more coherent or cohesive toolkit is one way to think about it. So, as a lot of people know, a lot of this started with dtype next and a lot of the underlying sort of numerics libraries for data processing and Clojure. But over the years, there have been more and more layers built on top of that foundation of high performance computing that basically make that level of processing more accessible and more usable for higher level things. And so, yeah, so, you know, to that end, a lot of these libraries are, reaching a state of maturity and also sort of evolving and converging on similar design patterns. So that they're easier to use together and easier to use in general. And that's one of the things that yeah, I'll be talking more about coming up at a conference that we're about to talk about. And one of the things that there's a lot of effort going on in the community towards. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and right, and so maybe another thing we should, mention here is this focus on beginner resources, which is kind of new. And in a way, the way I understand it, there was a change point which was kind of foundational to our attention as a community to beginner resources. And that was this workshop you gave at BobConf. And maybe could you talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. This was a super interesting experience for sure. So that workshop is a link to some materials from a conference that I went to where I put together just a little demo data analysis for some programmers. And so this was just a really eye-opening experience. So the audience was primarily programmers. So these were a lot of very experienced programmers, a lot of them with experience in different functional languages, but not necessarily Clojure. And we spent almost the entire time just like making literally anything work. And so um, it made me realize, yeah, it's really difficult to teach somebody Clojure or to get somebody productive in Clojure when they have a hard time just getting an environment set up. And so there's been a lot of talk in the community and in the um, yeah, the various whatever with amongst the various developers and stakeholders of all this tooling about how we should proceed with that. Because on one hand, everybody agrees that Jupyter notebooks basically are not ideal. They're a really useful tool for exploration and for these sort of exploratory initial analyses, but they're not what you want for any sort of production use. And, part of our whole thing with Scicloj and with the sort of Clojure data science stack is that it is suitable for production use and it is useful for sort of like real work. And I think that's one of the main that's just one of the main challenges in general in data like science/engineering right now is how do you bridge this gap between this like initial exploratory work and analysis and um, kind of like whatever trend seeking and then productionizing that and making it robust and making it work in a sort of more pipeline-y or dashboardy type of context. And so anyway, so that's just kind of a hard problem to solve. And so anyway, there's been a lot of development. Basically, all that to say, there's been a lot of development in the onboarding experience, the tooling around using these tools because you want a REPL, you need a REPL, but you also want a browser open or some way to visualize these sort of in progress steps that you're doing. So a data scientist workflow is very different than a software engineer's workflow where, if you're developing an app, you might make a small change and then like run a test and see if the change worked and you iterate that way. But if you're developing a pipeline or a dashboard or analysis or something like that, I mean, it's a similar type of workflow, except the output, that in progress, like output that you want, that tight feedback loop that you need is more, I guess, visual. You have this like visualization component in the mix. So anyway, this workshop, I put together this whole thing about doing an end-to-end analysis of a data set from the real world, which is also, I guess, always a huge mess. And this is another reason why workshops often use like curated and cleaned data, because otherwise you spend 90% of the time just getting the data into a usable state. So, but yeah, so this was a really interesting experience and hopefully a reasonable sort of end-to-end overview of everything that the Node stack can do right now, which is a lot. But yeah, I would say there's still some ongoing work in um, towards a consensus about what's the best sort of entry level toolkit. So right now there are a lot of options. So we have, and I guess we'll talk about that next maybe. We have Calva, which is spectacular piece of work. We have Clojure now, which is a Clojure kernel basically for Jupyter. And so you can use Jupyter, like a lot of people are very familiar with Jupyter and you can use it in this way with a Clojure kernel, but then you have this whole thing where it's, to move from that to a sort of usable or reproducible or production worthy analysis is a heavier lift. But anyway, there's lots of options. There's also Cursive now integrating with the visualization, I think. So maybe I'll leave it at that and we can talk about those next. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think in a moment we'll get to that, and that's really, really another big change which is happening these days, I believe.
Mhm.
Now, maybe for a moment, I think we should mention that we as a group, we have been taking care of beginner-friendly resources inside the Clojure community as part of what we do, but going and making things friendly to somebody who is new to Clojure is a huge step. And us at the Scicloj group, that hasn't been our focus, in the last 6 years. And now it is becoming very central. And that's why, the huge care and attention that is needed for that has been given at your workshop is changing us as a group, I think. And it is kind of showing us the way to upcoming workshops and other activities we do, which are, explicitly open to people who are new to Clojure. And one of them is this workshop that will take place in May 10th, very soon, one of the May events. And these will be actually two workshops just to, account for different time zones. And, we'll talk more about this in the coming couple of weeks. But, it is a moment of change mostly. And I will be glad to chat with anybody interested. Yeah, you were going to say something maybe.
Yeah, no, I'm just nodding in agreement. I think that's a good like call to action too, though. If you're a person who's into this kind of stuff and new to this world or interested in Clojure, we're always interested in hearing about your experience and how to make it more approachable and make all these tools more usable and help you get started basically, because I know that's a pretty big hurdle. And it's just, yeah, some of it, I know a lot of people would say it's like the getting started experience with Clojure is objectively very good. It's just, it's also relative to everything else. So, if you're like an R user, for example, you just open up RStudio and then like absolutely everything you could ever imagine needing is right there and it works out of the box in 2 seconds. Similar experience with getting started with Python stuff. So we're trying to sort of, not that we're ever gonna we're not trying to be those ecosystems or whatever, but just trying to take the best of those worlds and have that also whilst keeping, all the best parts of Clojure too.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and now maybe we can just say a very brief word about this active space of tooling. And of course, this should be addressed in live demos of the tools themselves that will be coming in the coming weeks. And so maybe we shouldn't talk so much about it, but maybe one point about what we do at Scicloj about tooling is that we have this standard for data visualization called Kindly, which is a certain way, a simple way to annotate Clojure forms and values for data visualizations. And in a way, just be able to say, this thing is of that kind, so please visualize it this way. And the Kindly standard is something that has been growing organically for a long time in community meetings and study sessions and so on. And now it is stable and used in our documentation, such as the Notch documentation and the workshops we're running and so on, and conference materials. And the other component of this story is that Kindly is now supported by quite a few tools. So not only Clay, which has been, our usual tool for, lightweight experience for data visualization and notebook making, not only Clay supports Kindly, but also quite a few others. And that's really thanks to the work of Timothy and Carsten, who have been putting a lot of care into the details of making the standard work. And that's still work in progress, and there is a lot to do. And one thing they have created is the Kindly Render engine that will be a foundational layer for many different tools who need to support Kindly visualizations. And Timothy's and Carsten's work with the authors of Clojupiter and VS Code and Calva and IntelliJ Cursive, all these projects that support inline visualizations now. This work means that we can compose with different documentation and different tooling in a compatible way. And many of these tools did put so much care into making things easy and beginner friendly, including Clay and Clojupiter and so on. And we just need to discuss more of that very soon. And yeah, any more comments on that before we continue, maybe?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's all super exciting for sure.
Yeah, maybe another thing that is not so new, but just very active these days is the study groups. And so, maybe this is familiar to many people that we have these different study groups at the Scicloj group. Two of the active ones are the one of AI meetups and the one of the about visual tools. And this AI meetup series is like a restart of something we have been doing in the past. And many thanks, to many people who have been very active in creating good talks and actually sharing what they do in a very open way and creating new collaborations around that. And the visual tools is a similar thing in another space, which has been very active. And if you wish, Kira, maybe you have more to say about it because that's something you were very much involved in throughout the years. And if you think this is,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's super exciting to see these continuing. I don't have much to add, but just that, yeah, this is a very long-standing meetup. We've been doing it, a few times a year for like years and years now, and there's always more stuff to talk about and always lots of exciting stuff going on. So, and it's really, I guess, maybe it's worth mentioning for people who haven't been to one of these before, like these are very low key, very accessible, very introductory way to access the community or way to get involved. So if you're just like remotely curious at all about any of the topics that you see listed here, you can just drop in. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to present anything. You don't have to, there's no pressure. There's no like expectations. It's really just like a virtual meetup, the same way that there, before the pandemic, you might remember going to meetups in person and hanging out in an office and just basically nerding out about whatever topic is on the docket for that day. And so these are just a way to kind of connect with the broader community in that type of environment. So, and on the flip side too, if you do want to present anything, if you do want to share, something that's relevant to whatever topic we have going on here, that's always invited and encouraged. You don't have to be like an experienced speaker. It doesn't have to be a super polished presentation. It can just be it can be anything from like a a 3-minute quick screen share, like here's a cool thing that I found, all the way to like an hour-long talk about a specific topic. So any, you know, just whatever. If you're interested, this is a way to get involved, and it's a very low barrier to entry and very open and inclusive format. And also we try to sort of shift the times around too to accommodate different time zones. We have people from like literally every corner of the world, from the West Coast of North America all the way to Asia, who participate. So um, if you're interested, don't hesitate to reach out to either myself or Daniel or anyone else in the Clojure Zulip, which we'll mention at the end. Um, and jump in and get involved.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that recently we have learned to be a bit more open to the diversity of time zones, which has been important always, but maybe now we kind of got the way to do that with many friends in different continents and so on. Yeah.
It's always hard for sure. It's hard to coordinate North America and Australia, but I don't know, Daniel somehow manages to pull it off. You're like the most sophisticated community organizer on the planet, I think. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, maybe another thing to mention is that all meetups, at least the public ones and maybe some of the internal ones, are announced at the Clojureverse, which is probably familiar to people, and also at the calendar feed, this great system that our friend Gert has created, and this nice UI that Martinez has created that allows people to follow and add to your calendar app, so you can follow our events and others of the Clojure community. And yeah,
Yeah.
so maybe very briefly, we can just mention that a few events are coming in May, and one of them is the workshop we mentioned for May 10th, and another one is Scicloj Light, a data analysis conference. And this conference will take place, except for the prep workshop, it will be taking place during 2 days of talks, which will focus on data analysis this time, and also many background sessions of different topics for to support the data analysis talks. And yeah, I do wish to add any more about this. By the way, Kira will also and myself will be speaking at this conference, and yeah, maybe that's a topic for another call, another video to share more about that, unless you wish to add anything now.
Yeah, no, we could get into the specifics later, but yeah, just this is gonna be a really exciting day. I guess maybe worth mentioning, well, it says right there, all these times are in UTC, and this is totally open. It's totally free to participate or to watch, and you can participate in the community also. So again, if you're curious about kind of what's going on in the community or what people are actually doing in the real world with this set of tools, this is like 2 days of programming, 2 days of talks about all these different topics and all these different domains in which people are using these tools. And you can see there's some of the Clojure heavyweights are going to be giving talks about their work. Paula's here, Daniel, Harold. So lots of exciting stuff. Lots of exciting stuff to learn about.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, we'll be talking more about this one for sure in the coming days and weeks. And yeah, and I think maybe one last thing I hope to mention very briefly is the new series of Macroexpand meetings that are in a way the space where we wish to help Clojurians gather and collaborate around this topic of growth for the Clojure community. And one of these meetings will actually take place in the middle of the conference, but this will be an ongoing series of meetings. And we're encouraging anybody who is interested to, just fill out this form anytime with, your availability and be able to share what topics you wish to share your experience at, or which topics you wish to get involved in, and so on. And you see these meetings will be topical, so they can be about academia or research or education. And a few of these are kind of overlapping intentionally. And we will be marking those spaces where we wish to support Clojure's growth into new domains and use cases and new fields in a way. So that's maybe the last thing I hope to update about, unless you wish to add anything about things which are going on at the moment. And yeah, what do you think? Should we add anything else?
Yeah, no, I think we've covered a lot of ground. It's all mentioned in this blog post, but yeah, it's probably enough for now. And there's always more to talk about, but that's a lot for today.
Yeah, and as always, please let us know if you wish to think together or collaborate on any of that. And we have our connection details and so on. So see you on the next times, I hope. And maybe, Kira, you wish to conclude this by anything you wish to comment about.
Yeah, no, this is great. Thanks so much, and yeah, I'm sure we'll be back with more soon.